All right, we're good. So Phil warned me and everything, and then I just forgot, didn't I? Sorry, Phil. I was sat near the back there next to some guys who travelled 7 hours by car to be here for the conference. And at the end, we came to the front, and we were doing communion, and I was we were going to take communion together with one of those guys, and I just had my hand on his shoulder, and I just was like, is there something about your breathing in your chest and just difficulty breathing? When I said that, the Lord the power of God just hit him, and he just went flying onto the floor. And afterwards, he told me, he goes, I had about a year ago, I think it was, he cut a heart condition that developed into a breathing condition, and really, really, really big problem affecting his life. And he goes, that was the reason I came for the conference. And he goes, and I was just sat there thinking how disappointed I was that I didn't get what I came for. And we're just about to leave, and then that happens. Boom. He emailed me the next day, and he was like, I just feel amazing. He goes, I feel amazing because that God heard the cry of my heart at that moment. And then he goes, and also I'm walking upstairs now. So it just feels like there is a momentum building here at the moment. And it's not a momentum that we're manufacturing. It's a momentum where we are just trying to partner with what he's doing, and he's doing something amazing. I just want to commend every single one of you and thank you, because every single one of you, it's your intentionality, and you're feeding your own passion and hunger for Jesus and pursuing unity and love and community that's making that happen. Because what God's doing here, it only gets built if we all build it with him and we do it together. So we're on a journey now of trying to work out, what does this look like? Where's he taking us? What does this look like in increasing measure? Now, the last few weeks, if you've been around, we've been talking about our prophetic journey as a church, haven't we? We've done 3 weeks talking about that. Lots of people have been asking us, okay, what next? What do we do with that? What does that look like? What next? So I got lumped with the job of following that. Thanks, guys. Don't know how that happened, but there you go. But I think the one thing to say is that we will be speaking into that over the next few weeks. And really, in reality, that is the ongoing journey, yeah? And I think although there are some practical things we can start to do to step into that together more and more, it would probably also, if I was sat there, it would worry me if someone came up here and said, okay, here's a presentation on exactly what's going to happen over the next 3 years or something like that. That would worry me, because God doesn't give you the full strategy when he gives you a word, doesn't he? He normally gives you the next step. And that, not really much more than that, right? You don't even know where that step's going. So we have some idea of kind of what we're doing with this, but we don't know the full story. So little quick test. Who can remember what we covered in the last 3 weeks? This is a homework test. First week was a apostolic. It's a mouthful. It's an apostolic training and resource center. Then we talked about freedom is our mission. And then we talked about being a strong home church, didn't we? And being the Eastgate to the city and the history behind that. And actually, last week, Liz said something that I thought was really good. She used the phrase about, it feels like we're in a season where God's establishing us as a church. And that really struck a chord with me, because a few years ago, just before COVID, God kept bringing me back to Proverbs 24 again and again and again. I was like, I didn't know why. I was just like, God, I like it. It's great. It's a really nice verse, but I don't know what you want me to do with it. And you don't have to turn there, but in verse 3, it says, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And that's like a picture it can be a picture for your life, can be a picture for your home, but it can also be a picture for us here. And I feel like us being here in this building, we've heard the story of that journey. That is, there's wisdom there, obeying prophetic words, stepping out in faith. We are here as a product of wisdom, and now it's a season of understanding where Eastgate is going to be established. And the question is kind of like, what does that look like? What does that look like? How do we step into that season, and what does that look like? So are you able to put that question up that we've got? Okay, so this was, I think, around about a year ago. So if you were here around a year ago, we had a Sunday or two where we put this question up. And it was just a question that as a leadership team, we were asking ourselves, what does it look like to be a spirit-led community where everyone is equipped to impact their world with the goodness of God? And that means everyone. You know, whether you're 8 or 88, it doesn't matter. What does that look like? And to keep challenging ourselves on what that looks like. This, in one sense, this is the how. To keep asking ourselves that question and keep pushing forward into this is the how we become those 3 things. For us to be an apostolic center, for us to all be carriers of his freedom, for us to become a strong church that is impacting the world around it in the community. It looks like everybody having that. And I really want to draw your attention to, oh, it's gone. Can it come back? Sorry, I did tell you I didn't need it for long, didn't I? First line, spirit-led. Those 2 words, spirit-led. It's all about us encouraging one another to be increasingly led by the Spirit in daily life, living lives that are centered around the presence of God. We have lifestyles that are centered around the presence, then we end up with a community that is centered around the presence. If we have a community that's centered around the presence, then we end up with transforming the environment around us with the presence. I just want to turn to Ephesians chapter 2. Just a bit of a warning today. The way I'd probably describe this morning is I'm not really giving you a meal. I'm giving you a series of appetizers. Apologies for that up front, but it's just because the task that I've got today is a little bit tricky. But I would say that 2 things. One, these are going to be themes that we explore further over time. So it's not just about this. But secondly, I'd encourage you to go and explore it yourself as well. So in Ephesians 2, and we can pick it up in verse 21. Whoa, thank you, Father. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And verse 22, and in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. Every single one of us carries the presence of God already. You carry the presence of God. Even when you don't feel like it, you carry the presence of God. Often what is the only missing ingredient is our awareness of that and our intentionality towards giving that our attention in daily life. Now that becomes an increasing reality as we increase and in increasing measure as we posture our lives in a way where we're giving more attention and increasing our awareness to the fact that he is with us. But the thing is, God's not looking for individuals. He's not looking for individuals who are just really good at carrying his presence on their own. It says here, he's looking for a dwelling place that's made up of a people who are joined up. A people who are joined up, who are being built together. So the fulfillment of this promise, becoming the dwelling place of him, is a promise that will never really reach its fulfillment outside a community. You know, being in the same room as each other doesn't imply togetherness, does it? Anybody ever been on a packed London commuter train? You can have as many armpits in your face as you like or don't like, but it doesn't feel like you're together, does it? That's not a together moment. Physical proximity is not togetherness. It's important, but doesn't make it on its own. Unity is paramount in that verse. Unity is paramount in that verse. It specifically says we are being built together. And I'd say there's probably 2 things going on here. There's the spiritual growth. You're being built, right? But then there's the community, the connection together. So my spiritual growth is intertwined with community. It's intertwined with my connection with you all the people around me. Now, when that happens, that's when the world takes notice. It's attractive. It's attractive to people because it's attractive to heaven. That's what he wants to rest on. I was talking about that verse with somebody this week, and I was joking about the fact that how many of us ever, when you're driving down the street and you saw like a brick lying on the side of the road, stop the car and go, wow, look at that brick. That is stunning. That is a really beautiful brick. I just want to get my phone out. We don't do that, do we? But we do. Many of us pay thousands of pounds and travel thousands of miles to go and look at architecture, to go and visit beautiful buildings in different parts of the world. So I'm going to talk, over the next few weeks, I think what we're probably going to be doing, we're going to be talking about some practical things we can all do to step into this journey together and how we can all play our part and what that might look like. But today, I'm kind of probably going to focus a little bit more on some sort of core values, or I think what are important realities that we can all sort of pay attention to and cultivate that will really, really help us and keep us in good stead. So like I said before, not a full meal, okay? Appetizers, okay? So I apologize if like people think, oh, you skimmed over that verse a little quick. I probably will. Also because I know I'm keeping my eye on the time. So if you want to turn to 2 Samuel chapter 6. Where is it? There we go. So there's 3 points I want to cover today, okay? And the first one is called embrace convenience and prepare for offense. Okay, so these are all things that I'm thinking, okay, these are for me some key things that are going to happen when God is taking you on a journey as a church, and there's momentum and it's building and it's excitement. Sometimes it's very easy to get caught up and it's like, yes, this is amazing. But we can sometimes go into it naively thinking, oh, woohoo, it's plain sailing now. But the enemy wants to come in. The enemy wants to come in. So 2 Samuel 6. So this is a story about David bringing the ark back into Jerusalem. He's recaptured Jerusalem, and this is about bringing the ark into Jerusalem. And probably going to have to cut this down a little bit. If we start at verse 5, it says, David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord. This is a great time of celebration. For David, this is his dream. Yeah, to capture Jerusalem, bring the ark into Jerusalem. This is his dream. With harps, lyres, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down and he died there beside the ark of God. Verse 8, then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? He was not willing. So let's just pay attention to that. This was like his big dream. Suddenly he's no longer willing. He's not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. In verse 12, it says, King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God. So David went down and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. I will stop it there. Now, I've talked about this before, about how this story of Obed-Edom is really kind of like a prophetic picture of how we can relate to the presence of God. And there's a number of different things going on in this story, but 2 things that stick out to me is I can see offense in there, and I can see inconvenience going on in there. Now, where do we see signs of offense. How do we know that's happening? Well, in verse 8, it says David was angry. And then in verse 10, it goes on to say that he was no longer willing to take the ark into Jerusalem. And as I just said, that was his dream. This was him. This was like the ultimate, the pinnacle of everything that he'd be going after was to make this happen. Suddenly he has this dramatic change of heart. And it says in verse 10, he took it aside or put it aside. So often when we get offended by God or by something that happens in church, the presence of God loses its central place in our lives if we're not careful. So what does he do with it? He puts it in the home of Obed-Edom. Now, who is Obed-Edom? Does anyone know who he is? He's a Philistine. He's one of the dudes that just a few lines above this, they actually were having a war with. He's like an enemy. Now, we also know David was afraid because it says he was afraid. So I can imagine how that conversation might have gone. It'd been like, okay, we all saw what happened to the last guy that touched this. We need to find someone expendable. We need to find, I don't want to go near this thing right now, so let's find someone who it doesn't really matter if okay, these guys. Yeah, pick one of those guys. I feel sorry for Obed-Edom at that point. But the fact that David would allow this kind of Israel's most valuable, holy artifact that was the greatest prize to go back into the home of the same enemy who had stolen it a little while ago says something about what was going on in David's heart. I can just imagine the day when they delivered the ark to Obed-Edom's house. Let us know how it works out. We'll be seeing you later. But picture this. You've got this huge, this wooden box. Well, maybe it wasn't huge, but this wooden box in the middle of your home. And and it represents the dwelling place of God on earth in the middle of your home. And you're terrified of touching this thing. It's like the greatest privilege, but the most terrifying thing imaginable. You've got no choice but to revolve your entire life around it. Suddenly, everything is repositioned around this thing. You can't do it any other way. That's inconvenience. That is inconvenience. And that was an inconvenience that just would have carried on until the point where David recognized what was happening in his house. And because what happens? Well, he embraces it. We could only presume that Obed-Edom embraces that inconvenience. And it says, the Lord blessed him and his entire household. And what does David do? He recognizes this. He's hurt, he hears about it, and he brings the ark back with rejoicing. Any life, any individual, any community that is in pursuit of a life that is centered around the manifest presence of God must overcome inconvenience. I'm convinced there's no other way. Every revival in history, one of the foundations of that revival was inconvenience. You can read it. But there's also offense. Offense will come. The question is, what will we do with it? One thing you can guarantee about offense is that relationship will never stay the same. You can try and pretend that it is, but that doesn't work. That relationship is changed forever. And it will either become something that you use to build greater closeness and connection, or it will cause you to withdraw. And that's what we see with David. He withdrew. What happened when he withdrew? There was a blessing that was intended for him that went to someone else. Do you think God intended the blessing to fall on a Philistine? I don't believe so. But he got the blessing because somebody else withdrew. Often, the people you're most offended by are the ones actually holding your breakthrough. Do you know that? It's true. So what you do with that offense when you feel it, when it happens, might just be pivotal in the direction, the trajectory of your life. You might not realize it at the time, but it might become a turning point. years ago when Kate and I were at Bethel. I was sat in this class one day, and this guy, who's now a friend of mine, called Chuck Parry, walked in the room, and I just thought, wow, you were so offensive to me. I was like, you are pushing every button right now. To me, he almost seemed irreverent. He wasn't at all. But it was just so silly. I was like, he's so silly. I mean, I know we're supposed to be joyful, but he's so silly. This is so offensive. But there's something about his life. He walked in breakthrough and the limitlessness of heaven. I'd never heard the stories that I heard from him. And something inside me said, I want to make him my friend. Right now, I want to run away from him, but I'm going to make him my friend. I remember I told my revival group pastor, I was like, I'm so offended by that guy that I've decided I'm going to make it my goal to become his friend. And he was like, that's going to be a changing moment in your life. When I came to Eastgate, we came here. Kate and I didn't move to England and then look for a church. We moved back to England for Eastgate. So we moved thousands of miles and changed country here. We chose to come here. And then when we came here, as you may remember, a few weeks ago, I talked about how for years it felt like I was further away from my calling and my dreams than I'd ever been. And I remember watching people who, some people would come in and they'd do the school here in Essel, and then they'd start like just walking into all these things, and it felt like I was just hidden away. What was I going to do with that? That was an opportunity for me to get offended. I felt left out a lot of the time, I'll be honest with you. The question I had to ask myself and answer is, do I believe God ultimately commands my destiny, or it's the decision of people? In Proverbs 19:11, you don't need to look there because we don't have time. It says, a man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. Now, that word overlook can actually also be translated pass through. I prefer that personally, but you can go with whatever you like. But if you read it like that, it is his glory to pass through an offense. The reason I like that is because when somebody says the word overlook to me, I can almost take that as a bit like, yep, I'm just going to look over here, pretend I can't see that thing down there. But that's not healthy. How do I pass through an offense? Because I can see the purposes of God on the other side of it. That's how we pass through an offense. That our eyes are fixed on him. And we bring it into the presence of God. And we're like, Lord, I don't understand this. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand these decisions. I'm finding this hard. But I give this to you. And then we let him show us his purposes for our lives. Okay, so that was number one. That was preach number one. What was it called? Embrace inconvenience, prepare for offense. Number two, prioritize the fear of the Lord. Now, I'm not going to spend loads of time on this because we've actually been preaching about this on and off for a couple of years now. And you might have noticed that this is a theme that is coming up more and more in the body of Christ. Actually, I saw Chris Valaton of Bethel Church at the early January was posting about how he really feels that we're coming into a season where the Lord is stirring up the fear of the Lord in people, and that is going to be decisive in revival. If you want my definition, it's just Dave's definition, okay? Take it or leave it. Because we have these phrases like the fear of the Lord that we use in church, and sometimes we can presume that we all know what that means, and it's not always helpful. Can be quite confusing. What does the fear of the Lord mean? Well, for me, it means cultivating an awareness of the reality of the nearness of God. Cultivating an awareness of the reality of the nearness of God. Whoa. Now, that can start off as a discipline. It starts off as something that might not feel natural, but the more you do it, the more it starts to become a reality, a daily reality. And really, it's about being intentional about being intentional in my daily life, in my daily walk with him, to turn the attention of my heart to that reality that is with me. Now, last week at Encounter Week, I was speaking about the Road to Emmaus story. That was the thing I couldn't finish talking. I couldn't finish reading. But I found it fascinating, that story. You've got two disciples who are walking about 7 miles on this road and unaware of the fact that their spirits are having an encounter with Jesus and they don't realize he's there. And it's only afterwards they were like, oh yeah, come to think of it, our hearts were burning the whole time. Now, when I know God's with me and I turn the attention of my mind to that and I'm conscious of that, that is going to look like something. That is going to change some stuff in my life. Now, why? I'm sure there's theologians in the room who are going to have some great answers for this, but why won't we sin when we're in heaven? I've got one reason. I'm not saying it's the reason, yeah? One reason is I believe our awareness of his reality, of his nearness will be so overwhelming, it'll be impossible to sin. You'll be so aware of the nearness of the Almighty God with you that it will literally be impossible. Every fiber of your body will be just vibrating with the awareness of the reality of the nearness of God. When I know he's with me, that looks like something. Okay, turn with me to Galatians chapter 5. I told you that we'll be able to be quick and nimble in our Bibles today. So, Galatians 5. I'm going to have to skip some things as well. But if we look at verse 16. Okay. You there? So I say, live by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. For the sinful nature desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the sinful nature. They are in conflict with each other, so that you do not do what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under law. Now, I'm not going to go through the acts of the sinful nature to save time. We pick up at verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. We'll stop there. I think that when we think and talk about the fear of the Lord, it's easy to think about it in an individual sense. So it's about my walk with him. It's about my relationship with him. It's about me, just me and him. But it's also about our relationship with one another. Now, when we think about the fruit of the Spirit, we know it's called the fruit of the Spirit. But often it's very easy to approach it like we're reading a checklist or a to-do list of things that make us a good or bad Christian. Okay, so let's have a look through. Was I joyful enough today? Oh, I don't know. I did get a little bit grumpy around 12-ish. Was I gentle enough? Well, I did raise my voice at 3. Was I patient enough? No, I was getting a little bit annoyed at that cash machine. And we go through that. We can almost approach it like, am I being a good Christian? If I don't tick all these things off, then I'm a terrible Christian today. Oh well, there's always tomorrow. Failed again today. But did you notice it's called the fruit of the Spirit? It's not called the fruit of Dave. It's not something I get to attain through striving. If I approach it like a checklist, my discouragement is pretty much guaranteed. What's the key here? Verse 16. Live by the Spirit, and you will not. So my job is to live by the Spirit. My job is to walk with him. Now let's insert the fear of the Lord here. When I cultivate the fear of the Lord in my daily life, what am I doing? I'm paying reverence to him. I'm turning my awareness to him. I'm paying reverence to him and the reality of his presence with me in my daily life, trying to posture myself to honor him. And the more my awareness grows, the greater my posturing is, and the more I seek to revere him. What's the promise? When I do that, and you will. And you will. The point is, the more I do that, the more I allow him to manifest his fruit in my life. It doesn't happen through my striving. It's his fruit, not mine. Am I saying God doesn't want me to be more joyful, to try to be more patient, to be intentional about being generous? No. But I'm saying he never gave you a checklist that he knew that you'd fail at. He never sent you a checklist that most of the time you would have crosses next to things. He gave you one job: love and honor his presence. The more we do that, the more we get everything else. Okay, so that was mini preach number 2. Prioritize the fear of the Lord. Number 3 is develop your superpower of encouragement. As we've been talking about, we are on a prophetic journey. Now, by definition, that means that we're walking on a path or a road, whatever it looks like, and we're always somewhere between promise and fulfillment. Aren't we? We're always somewhere between those things. And, Romans 4, it says that he is the God who calls things that are not as though they were. So when he says, you are an apostolic training and resource center, does that mean that we are the finished article of that? Does it mean that things won't look like that all the time? It's true. And the story of Abraham, which is given as example in Romans 4, is a great example of that. He was called a father of many nations when he had no kids. He was living between the promise and the fulfillment. God has given Eastgate calling and promises, but we're not there yet. We're entering into stuff. One thing you can be sure of is that if we walk out that journey, that the enemy is going to use devices like discouragement. He's going to use tactics like discouragement. You see this in the story of Nehemiah and the building project. And Pete's taught about that before. Now, when I embrace discouragement, I actually invite deception. I don't know if you've noticed about discouragement, but it doesn't come banging on the door saying, hey, I'm discouragement. I'm just to let you know, I've come to do a little bit of discouraging. It's going to be a bit tough for a few weeks, but yeah, that's pretty much what I'm here to do. It doesn't do that. It presents itself as your reality. Oh, this is you. This is your life. These are the facts. That's what discouragement does. But it's nearly always a version of your future devoid of the supernatural activity of God. It is. It's fake news. Let's turn to 1 Thessalonians 5. I think this might be the last one I've got you to turn to. You might be pleased to know. Okay. We'll start in verse 10. Now, this, just to give you a little bit of background, he's talking about really being confident and standing firm in our salvation, although he hasn't used those exact words, but that's really the context of what he's talking about, and encouraging one another in that sense. But there's also something specific that I want to pull out of it. So in verse 10, it says that he died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So when do we get to live together with him? Is it when we die? It's whether we live or die. We're told here to encourage one another and build one another up. So going back to that Ephesians verse that I talked about at the beginning, we're becoming a dwelling place. He's building us to become a dwelling place in which God lives by his Spirit. How are we built together? How? How are we built together to become a dwelling place in which God lives by his Spirit? One of the ways is encouragement. That's one of the ways. He says, build each other up. Now, the word therefore, whenever you see the word like therefore in the Bible, look at the bit before that. Because it's pointing the arrow to something that was just before that. What's the reason? He's saying, therefore encourage one another. Why? Okay, let's look at the bit before that. Because he died for us, whether we are awake or asleep, so we may live together with him. His presence. His manifest presence with us. Not just as a present, not just as a future, but as a present reality. That's the ultimate source of encouragement. If he's really with me, I know everything else is taken care of. Therefore, encourage one another. The enemy will go after that. He knows that the ultimate source of encouragement is your awareness of the presence of God with you. When you go through any trial, any test, I can guarantee you that if you look back, any time where you entered into full-on panic crisis mode, I'm guessing your awareness of the presence of God took a little bit of a back seat at that moment. Am I right? We've all had that. What if in those moments, in the middle of those trials, in the middle of those testing times, okay, I read it, I cried about it, I engaged with the emotions in a real way, but I was able to draw on God, you're here. You're here. You are really here. The living God. Suddenly, I have a reason to be encouraged. Why? Because it's the reason he gave every single person in Scripture. I will be with you. I will be with you. The enemy will come after that because he knows that's the ultimate source of encouragement. Which is precisely why I believe the visitation mindset has been so prevalent in Christianity for so long. That's an enemy tactic. And I believe why, on the verge of probably the greatest revival the world's ever seen, COVID came along and isolated every single one of us from the people who were there to encourage us about this. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but discouraging people are nearly always discouraged people. Like, I had a revelation about this recently. I had a series of conversations with people, we're nearly done, sorry, conversations with people over a course of a few days where it just felt like I just was being hit by discouragement. And I was like, oh, you walk out of those things, you start questioning everything, what you're doing, why I'm doing it, maybe I was completely wrong about that. And it's almost like, I don't know if you had this, but you walk into a conversation sometimes and you feel discouragement come in the room, and it's almost like this cloud just comes on you and it just follows you for the rest of the day. It's tangible, right? And I just had this like penny dropping moment where I was like, oh, they're discouraged. Like, it wasn't all about me. Dave, stop thinking all about you. It wasn't all about me. That person's discouraged. And that's an atmosphere that I was meant to come in and release breakthrough in. What I did is I partnered with it, and then I took it with me like a little backpack for the rest of the day. They're in pain. The enemy's brought discouragement to that person. Oh, suddenly I've gone from feeling sorry about myself to having compassion for them. Oh, okay. I know what I need to do. I need to go to war with my weapon of encouragement. I need to call out everything that is amazing and I appreciate about that person. And do you know what? It is unbelievably powerful. Actually, the effectiveness is really, really quick. I need to make those people a target. So I want to encourage you. If there are people in your life, people in your world who you're like, oh, it just feels doesn't feel very good when I'm around them. It feels a bit discouraging. I want to make them a target. Make them a target for encouragement. Make a point of just saying something you really appreciate about them. It doesn't have to be a prophetic word. Yeah, that's great, but don't wait for a prophetic word. Just tell them something that you appreciate. Or even just look them in the eye and just say, I'm so thankful that God placed us in the same church. If just saying that and looking them in the eye, I just probably will do a lot on its own. So, quick recap. Sorry for this whistle-stop tour this morning. What have we done? We've covered embrace inconvenience, prepare for offense. It's naive not to. It is going to come. These are tactics we know the enemy's going to use. Prioritize the fear of the Lord. Because when we prioritize the fear of the Lord, he manifests his fruit in our lives. And what happens is we notice that it starts to affect the environment, not just our individual lives. And the last one was develop your superpower for encouragement. I believe we're in a season where there's going to be many things to be encouraged about. We've seen, when we come in here on a Sunday, I'm like, wow, the presence of God in here. It feels amazing. And not just that, but I feel so many people in the room are enjoying the presence of God. We're seeing people getting healed spontaneously during worship. Amazing things happening. But in a season of great encouragement, the devil will try and come and bring discouragement. And I tell you what, the thing about discouragement is when you come out of it, you look back on it and you realize it was illogical most of the time. Why was it illogical? Like I said before, it was a future or a version of your life devoid of the supernatural activity of God. It was fake news. Right. I really want to do a notice. Can we put my notice up, please? Sorry, this is a bit cheeky, I know. Is that? Yes. Right. One voice. This is on Friday, the 24th of Feb. We're having a multilingual prayer and worship night. I don't even know what that is. I've never been to one, and we definitely don't know how to do one, but we just feel something good. It feels good about it. Something feels good about coming together, and even it's messy, it's okay, but in everybody's first language, getting to worship and pray out and adore him together, I just feel like it's going to make his heart happy. And that makes my heart happy. So I would just love to encourage you to come. It could be something really powerful. Could be a really powerful mess, as I said, but I just feel like there's something God loves about it. He loves unity. I would encourage you to come. Whether you don't have to be a singer, you don't have to be a musician, you don't have to be on a team for anything. If you just love Jesus and you love being in community, then come and let's just see what happens, okay? So, one voice. And by the way, this is not, when you say multilingual prayer and worship night, what I don't want people to think is, oh, that's for people whose first language isn't English. No, it's for every first language, including English, right? Every single one of us. So Friday the 24th from 7:30 up here, please come and let's see what happens, all right? Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.